What happens when a homeless man boldly asks Elon Musk for just $1? The answer will leave you speechless. The afternoon sun beat down on the busy streets of Austin, Texas, where pedestrians weaved through traffic and honking cars. Among the chaos, Carl sat on the edge of the sidewalk, his tattered jacket barely holding together against the cool breeze. His worn-out boots had seen better days. But today, like every other, he sat quietly, a small cardboard sign resting against his knees.
Hungry.
Anything helps, it read in shaky black marker. Carl's life hadn't always been like this. A few years back, he had a steady job at a small manufacturing plant. But then came the layoffs, the medical bills, and eventually the eviction notice. With no family to fall back on, Carl had learned to live day by day. His world had shrunk to these few blocks where people passed him by, avoiding eye contact, their hurried steps and unspoken rejection. But today was different. As Carl watched the usual stream of cars waiting at the traffic light, his eyes locked onto something striking, a sleek Tesla, its polished silver frame gleaming under the sun. At first, he didn't think much of it. Luxury cars were common in this area, often carrying people who barely noticed him. But something about this one made him pause. The driver's window rolled down, and Carl's heart skipped. He squinted, leaning forward slightly. It couldn't be. Was that Elon Musk? Carl blinked hard, convinced he was mistaken. But the unmistakable face of the tech billionaire stared back, a rare moment of stillness in the rush of the day. His throat went dry, but something deep inside him, a mixture of desperation and courage, urged him to act. Picking himself up, Carl shuffled toward the car. Each step felt heavier than the last as doubts crept in. What was he doing? Asking a billionaire for money? But as he reached the car, he knocked gently on the window, his voice cracking as he asked, "Can you give me $1?" For a moment, silence hung in the air. Carl braced himself for the usual wave of dismissal, the wave of indifference he had come to expect. But Musk didn't look away. Instead, he turned, his eyes narrowing, as if trying to understand the man before him. And then, to Carl's astonishment, Musk opened the car door. "What did you say?" Musk asked, stepping out onto the street. His tone wasn't condescending or amused. It was curious. Carl froze. This wasn't the reaction he had anticipated, and for the first time in years, he felt both exposed and acknowledged. But there was no turning back now. Carl had no idea that this one question, this single dollar, would lead to a moment that would change his life forever. Carl swallowed hard, his mind scrambling for something to say. He hadn't planned this far ahead. The man standing before him was one of the wealthiest people in the world. Yet there was no trace of arrogance in Musk's expression. Instead, his eyes held curiosity, a genuine interest that Carl hadn't seen in anyone's face for a long time. Carl stammered, his voice shaky. "I just asked if you could spare $1." He felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. $1? What kind of question was that for a billionaire? But it was too late to take it back. Musk tilted his head, studying Carl like he was solving a puzzle. $1, he repeated, almost as if testing the weight of the words. Then he reached into his pocket, pulling out a crisp wallet. But instead of handing over the money immediately, he paused, glancing at the cardboard sign tucked under Carl's arm. "What's your story?" Musk asked, his voice calm yet probing. "Why are you out here?" Carl hesitated. Most people didn't care about his story. They either threw loose change at him without a second glance or ignored him entirely. But something about the way Musk asked made Carl feel seen, even vulnerable. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure how much to share. "I lost my job a while back," Carl began, his words halting and uneven. "Then things just got out of hand. Bills piled up, and I couldn't keep up. I've been out here ever since." Musk nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Carl noticed his gaze drift to the jacket he wore, its frayed edges barely clinging to the fabric. For a moment, Carl thought he saw something flicker in Musk's expression. Empathy, maybe. But he couldn't be sure. "You asked for $1." Musk said finally, his tone shifting slightly. "But why only $1? Why not ask for more?" Carl blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know, he admitted after a pause. I guess it's just easier to ask for something small. People are more likely to say yes. Musk's lips curled into a faint, thoughtful smile. Interesting, he said, almost to himself. Most people would ask for as much as they could get. Carl couldn't tell if Musk was mocking him or genuinely intrigued, but before he could respond, Musk took a step closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Do you think $1 would really change anything for you? The question landed like a punch to Carl's gut. He didn't know how to answer. Of course, $1 wouldn't change his life, but it could mean a meal, a few minutes of relief from the gnawing hunger that had become his constant companion. I guess not, Carl admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But it's something. Musk nodded again, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he reached into his wallet and handed Carl a crisp $100 bill. Carl stared at the money, his mind racing. This wasn't just $1. This was an entire lifeline. I don't know what to say, Carl stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. But Musk wasn't done. He placed a hand lightly on Carl's shoulder, drawing his attention back. I want to ask you something, Musk said. If you could do anything to change your situation, anything at all, what would it be? Carl had no idea that this question would mark the beginning of a conversation that would reshape the trajectory of his life. Carl's fingers trembled as he clutched the $100 bill. He stared at it, his mind caught between disbelief and gratitude. Musk's question hung in the air, weighty and impossible to ignore. What would I do to change my situation? Carl repeated softly, almost to himself. He glanced up at Musk, whose gaze remained steady, expectant. It wasn't a casual question. It was one that demanded an honest answer. Carl exhaled deeply, his thoughts racing. I'd get a clean start, he said finally. His voice was quiet, but each word carried years of struggle. Find a place to stay. Clean myself up. Maybe even get a job again. I just need a chance. A real one. Musk's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to brighten slightly. A clean start, he echoed, nodding slowly. That's a good answer. Carl felt a pang of self-doubt. Was it a good answer or just the only one he could think of? But before he could spiral into uncertainty, Musk leaned against the car, folding his arms as if settling in for a serious discussion. What's stopping you? Musk asked. Carl hesitated. The answer was obvious, but saying it out loud felt like admitting defeat. Money, he said simply. And the system. It's hard to climb out when you've already fallen this far. Musk tilted his head, considering this. You're not wrong, he said after a moment. The system isn't built to help people like you. It's built to keep things running as they are. But he paused, his gaze sharpening. If you had the resources, just enough to get back on your feet, do you think you could make it work? Carl's throat tightened. The question was as daunting as it was hopeful. I think so, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I mean, I'd try. I wouldn't waste the chance. Musk studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. That's what I like to hear. Carl didn't know what to make of Musk's cryptic response, but before he could ask, Musk continued. You know, Carl, most people think success is about big ideas and luck. And sure, those things help, but more often than not, it's about persistence, getting up every time you're knocked down. Sounds like you've had plenty of practice with that. Carl chuckled softly, the sound more bitter than amused. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Musk's smile widened slightly. Good, because persistence is the one thing money can't buy, and it's the one thing that matters most. The words hit Carl harder than he expected. He'd spent so long feeling invisible, defined by his failures, that he'd almost forgotten the strength it took just to survive each day. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't dared to hope for. Pride. Musk straightened, his tone shifting slightly. Here's the deal, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I'm going to give you more than just money. I'm going to give you a chance, a real one. But it's up to you to take it. Carl's heart pounded. What do you mean? Musk reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card. He handed it to Carl, who stared at the sleek, minimalist design. There was no company logo, no flashy branding, just a phone number and the name Elon Musk. "Call this number tomorrow," Musk said. "Tell them I sent you. They'll know what to do." Carl's hands shook as he held the card. I don't understand. What are you offering me?" "A job," Musk said simply. "A place to start. But whether you take it or not, that's entirely up to you." Carl felt a lump form in his throat. The weight of the moment was overwhelming, the possibilities both exhilarating and terrifying. Musk stepped back toward his car, but before he got in, he turned and said, "Don't waste this, Carl. Opportunities like this don't come around often." With that, he drove off, leaving Carl standing on the sidewalk, clutching the card that could change everything. That night, Carl sat under the dim light of a street lamp, staring at the card in his hand. The name and number seemed almost unreal, as though they could vanish if he looked away. Doubts crept into his mind. Was this some kind of test? A joke? People like Elon Musk didn't just hand out opportunities like candy, especially to people like him. But as the night deepened and the streets grew quiet, another thought took hold, a rare flicker of hope. What if this was real? What if Musk had seen something in him worth believing in? Carl clenched the card tightly, his resolve solidifying. He had nothing to lose. The next morning, Carl found a public phone booth outside a gas station. The phone's receiver was sticky and the keypad was faded, but it worked. His heart raced as he dialed the number on the card, each beep amplifying his anxiety. After a few rings, a calm, professional voice answered. "Elon Musk's office. How can I help you?" Carl froze, his tongue heavy in his mouth. This was real. This was actually happening. He forced himself to speak. My name's Carl. Mr. Musk gave me this number," he said. "He said you'd know what to do." The woman on the other end didn't miss a beat. "Of course, Carl. Mr. Musk mentioned you. Can you come to our downtown office today at noon?" Carl blinked in disbelief. Yeah, I can." "Great. We'll see you then." The line went dead. Carl stared at the phone in his hand, his mind swirling with questions. What was waiting for him at that office? He had no idea, but he wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. At exactly noon, Carl walked into a gleaming office building downtown. He felt out of place in his tattered clothes, but no one batted an eye as he stepped into the elevator. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, he was greeted by a young woman with a warm smile. "Mr. Carl?" she asked. He nodded, his throat too dry to speak. "Right this way," she said, leading him down a pristine hallway. At the end of it, Carl found himself in a conference room with large windows overlooking the city. And there, sitting at the head of the table, was Elon Musk. "Carl?" Musk said, standing to greet him. "I'm glad you came." Carl sat down slowly, still unsure if this was all a dream. Musk wasted no time. "Here's the deal," he began, sliding a folder across the table. "Inside is a job offer. It's an entry-level position at one of my facilities. Nothing glamorous, but it's a start. You'll get a steady paycheck and access to resources to help you get back on your feet." Carl opened the folder, his hands trembling. Inside was everything Musk described. A lifeline in black and white. He couldn't believe it. "Why are you doing this?" Carl asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why me?" Musk leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Because I've been where you are, Carl. Not on the streets, but at the bottom, doubting myself, not knowing what the future held. Someone gave me a chance once, and it changed everything. Now I'm giving you the same." Carl felt tears sting his eyes. He wasn't used to this kindness, compassion. He wanted to say thank you, but the words got stuck in his throat. Instead, he nodded, clutching the folder as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. "Don't let me down," Musk said, his tone firm but encouraging. Carl left that office feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. This wasn't just a job. It was a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. Carl's life began to change the very next day. He reported to the address listed in the folder, a sprawling Tesla manufacturing facility on the outskirts of Dallas. The buzz of machinery filled the air. And for the first time in years, Carl felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He was issued a uniform, introduced to a team, and trained for his role in assembling components for electric vehicles. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Carl poured himself into it. The first few weeks were grueling. His body ached from standing for hours, and his hands struggled to adjust to the precision required. But he kept going. Every paycheck felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming his dignity. He rented a modest room and a shared house and saved every penny he could. Slowly but surely, Carl was rebuilding his life. Word of his story began to spread around the facility. His coworkers, initially skeptical of the man who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere, warmed to him as they saw his determination. Carl became a source of inspiration, proof that second chances were real and worth fighting for. But Carl's transformation didn't stop there. One evening, as he sat in his tiny room, counting out his savings, he thought about the countless others still stuck in the place he had been. The thought gnawed at him. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, to believe that no one cared. He couldn't just move on and forget about them. Using a portion of his savings, Carl began visiting shelters around the city, bringing hot meals and supplies. He'd sit with the people there, listening to their stories, sharing his own, and reminding them that change was possible. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And the more he gave, the more he felt his purpose solidify. Months later, Carl received an unexpected call. It was Elon Musk. "I've been keeping an eye on you," Musk said, his voice warm. "You've done well, Carl. Better than I expected." Carl smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you." Musk paused before continuing. "I hear you've been helping others. That's impressive. It shows character. I want to offer you something more." Carl's heart raced. "More?" "Yes," Musk said simply. "I want you to lead an initiative I've been considering, one focused on workforce development for people who've hit rock bottom. You'd help identify candidates, mentor them, and guide them towards sustainable careers. You'd be the bridge for others. Just as I was for you." The offer floored Carl. He thought back to the day he'd approached Musk's car, desperate for $1. The man he was then and the man he was now felt worlds apart. But this new opportunity? It was a chance to turn his pain into purpose on a scale he'd never imagined. "I'd be honored," Carl said, his voice steady, despite the emotions swirling within him. The next chapter of Carl's life began that day. He wasn't just a man surviving anymore. He was a man thriving and helping others do the same. His story became a beacon of hope, proving that one act of kindness could ignite a transformation not just in one person, but in an entire community. Years passed, and Carl's impact only grew. The initiative Musk entrusted him with, now called Second Spark, became a nationwide program. It connected thousands of people, those who had been overlooked and discarded by society. With resources, training, and jobs that allowed them to rebuild their lives, Carl traveled across the country, meeting people who reminded him of his former self, sharing his story, and proving that hope wasn't just a lofty ideal. It was a lifeline. Carl never forgot the moment that had started it all. A simple question to a man in a sleek electric car. That question had unlocked a chain of events he never could have predicted. But the story wasn't just about him. It was about the people he'd helped, the lives he'd touched, and the idea that even in the darkest moments, there's potential for light. One day, during an event celebrating the program's 5th anniversary, Carl stood on stage addressing a crowd of graduates. They were people from every background, former inmates, single mothers, veterans, and countless others who had been given a second chance. As Carl spoke, his voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "5 years ago, I asked a man for $1, he began, his words deliberate. But what he gave me wasn't money. It was an opportunity. And with that opportunity, I realized something. No matter how far down you've fallen, no matter how invisible you feel, there's always a way back. You just need someone to believe in you." The crowd erupted into applause, but Carl wasn't done. "What I've learned is that kindness, when paired with action, can change everything. We all have the power to lift someone up. It doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's as simple as asking a question or giving someone a chance." As he stepped down from the stage, Carl caught sight of Musk in the audience, his trademark grin spreading across his face. Musk approached, shaking Carl's hand firmly. "You did good, Carl," Musk said, his voice filled with pride. Carl smiled back, his eyes glistening. "We did good." As the event wrapped up, Carl stood quietly, taking it all in. The journey from a homeless man with nothing to his name to a leader of a movement had been unimaginable. But it was a reminder that life's biggest transformations often start with the smallest moments. Carl's story became a testament to the power of resilience, kindness, and opportunity. It was proof that one act of courage, asking for help, could create a ripple of change that touched countless lives. If this story moved you, remember that we all have the ability to make a difference, no matter how small the gesture. Share this story, reach out to someone in need, or take a step toward your own second chance. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of hope and connection.